Hello everybody, I'm here the Japanese Train, aka Matt.
And I'm Master of the Lemons, aka Lemmy.
And we're sorry to snub you guys with only one character gallery last month, and we decided to make up with it with something equally snubby. Today we're doing episode 21 on Madge the Snub-Nosed Scammo Lorry.
We're gonna use the word snub a lot in this, I'm guessing, from the introduction here.
Bulgy's a big fan of this character.
Yeah, boo, snubs! But yeah, so we're now in the Christmas season. Last year we did Terrence and we did the Snow Machine. And we were thinking about this year, well, who's associated with snow that we can still do? Who do we have? And Madge's big episode is Cool Truckings. You know, slipping and sliding around in the snow, and she's just a vaguely snowy, wintry character. And I think that's a good way to kick things off. And I think there's a lot to say about her, because it's really interesting. Up until Madge, I don't think we had any real road vehicles associated with the Skarloey Railway. I'm not sure if I want to go as far as to say that she's owned by the Skarloey Railway, but it kind of seems like, if not, she's at least owned by a company that's very local to that area.
So Madge is described, I believe in Watch Behind Your Buffers, as she makes deliveries throughout the villages in this area, and I think it happens to go alongside the Skarloey Railway and does business with the Skarloey Railway so much that she's effectively part of the railway.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the same way almost that, like, Birdie operates along Thomas's branch line and is so intertwined with Thomas's schedule that it's like he might as well be part of that railway.
And I think Madge goes a step further than that too, because I think that she, it's explained really early on that she's very invested in helping other people and very invested, almost, to where some people might be uncomfortable with how much she's like considering their status, their feelings, how they're doing, what they need.
But it's interesting because when was Madge's design introduced?
It's between 1948 and 1964 or 1967, 48 to 67.
That's really good, because that means that she could be present for the Skarloey Railway's lean years. So,
yeah.
Imagine if she arrives that early. And then, because think about, when did the Skarloey Railway need more help than during the gallant old engine days, where Rheneas is running the whole damn railway on his own, Skarloey is out of service, and so, things are teetering on a knife edge. That railway is about to fall apart. Like, around 1951 is really where the Skarloey Railway is just desperately struggling to keep alive. And that's kind of the gallant old engine era. And so I wasn't sure if Madge would be built this early or not, but she is built just early enough where she could be present for those early days.
It's interesting because Watch Behind Your Buffers takes place exclusively with Skarloey and Rheneas. So
you could put that in the 50s if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could. And Skarloey and Rheneas are so stressed out at this period of time that, Madge comes along and she wants to be a pal where they don't really have any others.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, so there would be nights where, maybe Rheneas and Skarloey come back, like, every night, and they're just, like, filthy, and, Madge is right there at the sheds to greet them and just make sure that at least they can practice locomotive hygiene and not be depressed and not be...
Yeah, That's honestly a good way to put it, Matt, because, when I think about it, because that's one of Madge's big things, is keeping the engines clean. And when Skarloey and Rheneas, really Rheneas, because Skarloey wouldn't even be operating when she arrives, Rheneas is just caked in soot, and he's just working all day, every day, and he's just so overworked and in such desperation. It's like, just to have somebody come to his shed with buckets of water and soap and just be like, you deserve a wash down at the end of the day. It would be such a heartwarming moment. Like, when Madge first comes to the railway, I imagine, like, when Madge is fresh out of the factory, I'm imagining, in this scenario, right?
Yeah. She's got pep in her step. She sees the best in everybody. And when she comes to the railway, I'm sure that at the beginning she's, she sees them toiling in the yards and stuff, and
she's just like this is a weird pitch, but I really feel like Madge would have, like, a southern accent. Like, I feel like she talks something like this. I know that that's not the voice that Michael Brandon does, But I know he gave a lot of characters like a southern accent, and for some reason he didn't do that with Madge, and I feel like she'd be a good one to have that.
I think because Madge is a good southern name, too.
Yeah, that's true. And also, like, she's just so, like, rough and tumble, just the way that she's built. I feel like, that kind of, like, farmhand voice just kind of works for her.
And I think that she does do a lot of work with the farms. Like, I think that she helps...
I'm sure she's delivering products from, like, all the farms in the villages along the line and all the, like, what other industry exactly is there along the Skarloey Railway? She's not delivering from big booming factories. She's delivering from farms. She's delivering from very small industries.
She's delivering like soap and brushes.
Yeah,
and, like...
exactly. Like really small, locally made items. I feel like this voice would reflect that. I think at first she would like approach Rheneas and be like, "Howdy, you need any help?" And Rheneas in the back of his head would be like, "God, yeah, I need a lot of help. My railway's about to fall apart." But, what he says is, No, we're fine, thank you. I appreciate it, but we've got it under control."
Do you think either of them would be put off that a lorry is offering to take over? Do you think they have that same skepticism of lorries?
I don't know.
Because I think there's a mentality that when a railway is closing, when a railway is struggling, suddenly the road traffic starts to come in for the kill.
That's true. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. So it's one of the few times where a railway is failing in Thomas, but it's not failing because of the pressure of like an outside force, like diesels or or road vehicles or something. It's just simply
manpower.
Yeah, it just doesn't have enough. It doesn't have enough manpower. You got to remember the Skarloey Railway in the early 50s and the late 40s is just being run by by Mr. Ivo Hugh and by Mr. Peter Sam, and then owned by Sir Handel Brown. And like that's it. It's like literally Peter Sam and Ivo Hugh on the footplate. Like there isn't like a roster of all these drivers and firemen who can all do their job. It's like literally just like 3 guys. Like that's it. That's the railway right now. They are in dire straits. Sir Handel Brown is not in the interest of modernizing the railway. To him, it's kind of like a burden. It's like, if only we had more engines, this wouldn't be a problem. Skarloey is broken down in the shed. We've only got Rheneas. He's running all the trains. He's getting cramps all the time. His side rods are jamming up. It's disastrous, right? And so he needs more engines desperately. So he would bring her in, to complement the engines that are already there.
I think I mentioned that because of Rheneas's... I think I get a sense that he's inherently skeptical of something new coming along if he can do it better himself.
I do get the sense that I think he is, but...
Maybe stubborn, kind of...
I see him as stubborn, yeah. I see him as... I think he would be prideful about it.
Right, so I think that even if it's not for lorry reasons, Madge would offer to help, and Rheneas would decline it. And then I think it would take Skarloey.
That would be good. So let's set the scene for this, is that Skarloey is barely being run at this time. He's in bad shape. He's in the back of the shed, right? Probably, his boiler's in bad shape, and he's coughing in there. "I'm all right, Rheneas, really." "You don't sound all right." "No, I can take another train if you just get your rest, Skarloey. I've got it." But Rheneas is on the verge of a breakdown as well. He's not in good shape either. We see what happens in Gallant Old Engine. What happens in that episode is happening, like, next to every day, right? It's happening all the time, right? It's not just that one occasion. It is for years. Every day he's having instances like that where he gets a cramp, but he has to keep going to keep the railway running.
And that's just one of the few times he managed to stop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and so both of these engines are in dire straits. But Rheneas, I think, feels a great responsibility. I've always seen Rheneas like he's the older of the two. He's the more mature of the two. And Skarloey is a lot more lighthearted, I would say. He's a lot less mature. And you just look back at, very old engines. You look back at Buck and Bronco. Yeah, you look back at, like, what Skarloey was like in his youth.
I think what you get out of very old engines is a very intensified version of what they settle into.
Yeah, exactly. I think so as well. Because now we're like 80 years on from that, but it's not like they're both going to lose their personalities. Skarloey is very responsible now, but he's still more optimistic and more childlike than Rheneas is. They're both, wise old men, but Skarloey
He is a bit more fun.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Rheneas is kind of very prim and proper, very stern, very stuffy, very, well, we've got to do the best we can for our railway, even if it means having to struggle along for days on end. Whereas Skarloey's just like, why don't we just sit out and count the stars, just for one night, and Rheneas is just like, but there's so much work to do, So, like, that's the dynamic that I see.
Mm-hmm.
And so Madge rolls right into this dynamic. And so she talks to Rheneas, asks, do you want my help? I mean, there's 100 different things I could do to help. No, thank you. We are fine. I appreciate it, but we've got it under control.
And then he would kind of putter away, and then Madge would see Skarloey in the sheds and go kind of like right up to him.
Yeah, exactly. She'd like drive into the shed, and Skarloey would be like, he'd be asleep, right? And then she'd be like, psst, hey, little old engine, psst.
She'd honk her horn at him.
and then Skarloey would be like, what? What? Oh, hello. And she'd be like, her snub nose would literally be like right next to his. Like she's just staring him right in the eyes. And Skarloey's like, oh, how did you find your way in here?
Yeah.
And, Madge would just be like, oh, I'm the new lorry in town. I was hoping I could help you in your railway.
Your brass is very filthy. I've got some polish in the back if you'd like some. And Skarloey would say, it's like, oh, no, I'm quite all right. And then...
That would be really sweet. It's like if Madge... Because Madge, I feel like she almost settles into this role as the kind of part-time janitor for the Skarloey Railway, where she's got, like, a maintenance shed out in the back, and she's got all these brushes and tools and all these things that, like, she can, like... She's not owned by the Skarloey Railway, but whenever something's busted... she goes and fixes it.
It would be great to see her some days, like, without her trailer, just, like, puttering along.
Maybe some days she could even have, like a kind of like a, like how Elizabeth has, like, a big wooden bucket on the back of her?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you could fit something like that to Madge.
And it would be kind of embarrassing to Rheneas, too. Like, he'd come into the station and Madge would already have taken, like, 3 cars worth of his cargo.
Yeah, exactly. Like, one day you've got Skarloey kind of on a siding watching as Rheneas peters about, and Rheneas is shunting trucks, right? Skarloey is too weak to help. Skarloey's just like, oh, I wish I could help him. He's in bad shape. He needs... And Madge just looks on and sees Rheneas struggling, and she's just like, hold my trailer. And she unhitches the thing and it drops, and Skarloey's like, wait, what? And she just drives over into the yard and starts biffing and shunting trucks all over the place, getting them all in the right places. And Rheneas... imagine that, though. Rheneas is, like, very slowly trying to get all of his work done in this yard. Totally exhausted, covered in soot, just like, he is just wiped out, right? And then all of a sudden, Madge comes zipping by with, like, 3 trucks pushing them across the yard. Like, it would be the most silly, clumsy-looking thing. Just this 3-wheeled lorry just veering all over the place around the yard. But she'd get it done, right? She's like... I think she'd have the mentality where there's nothing she can't do. She'd jump into a situation and figure out later if she's capable of it or not.
Yeah.
And so, she shunts the whole yard, and at last, she shunts these last few trucks. And she then swerves around and looks to Rheneas and Skarloey, and she's like, I did it! I can't believe I did it! Wow! And,
maybe next time I could just lose these tires and just get some rail wheels going.
Yeah, and she's, like, giggling about it. She's like, and then she looks at Rheneas, and he's just pissed off. And he's like, that was my work. You should not have come in here and stuck your snub nose where it didn't belong. And Skarloey's just like, Rheneas, maybe you should not now, Skarloey. She doesn't know how things work here. I don't appreciate her coming in and changing our way of doing things. And, he's, like, just not pleased at all. And Madge gets really sad. And she's like, oh, sorry. I guess I overstepped. I should go. And she just drives out of there sadly. She collects her trailer and she just leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, and Skarloey's like, Skarloey wants to say something as she goes. He's like, and he doesn't say anything. And then that night in the sheds, Skarloey and Rheneas are both together, and Skarloey's like, you should have been nicer to her. She was only trying to help. And Rheneas is like, we don't need her help, Skarloey. We've got things under control. And Skarloey just, like, starts chuckling. He's just like, what's so funny? Are you kidding, Rheneas? Look at you, covered in grime, filthy. Your cylinders are about to fall off, for Christ's sake. We need help desperately. Why won't you just accept hers? And Rheneas just looks at the ground, and he's just like, oh, I don't know. I should be able to bear the burden. This is our railway, we're the engines. We should be able to handle this. It's humiliating to have to accept help from a lorry. And then Skarloey's just like, well, these are humiliating times. The railway's desperate, and, well, we're going to have to accept the fact that we can't do it all on our own.
You know what would be nice?
What?
Is if later that day, Rheneas is kind of like, oh, I don't know. And then the next day, Edward comes along at Crovan's gate and talks to him. So Rheneas starts venting to Edward about Madge. He's like, Rheneas is like, I've met the strangest character. I've seen a lorry shunting in our yard. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then Edward would say something like, well, did she get the job done? Well, she did. And I pulled a couple extra passenger trains because of it. Well, then sounds like she did a bang-up job then.
Yeah. Like, Edward's just immediately, like, with the practical approach, just like,
Yeah.
I know what it's like to run a railway in desperation. I mean, you should have seen the Northwestern a few years back. You had barely any engines, desperate enough to bring in poor Henry. Sorry, Henry. Henry's, like, on a nearby siding, like...
I'm right here! Don't remind me!
Terribly sorry. My point is, our railway used to be very desperate too, but we ended up accepting help from very unlikely places. And I dare say that your railway should do the same, Rheneas. And Rheneas, is just, looks away sternly. He's just like, it seems like no one's on my side on this matter. And Edward's like, maybe that should tell you something. And Rheneas just like, lets off steam angrily, and he's like, fine, I'll let a lorry shunt my trains. There, are you happy? Yes, quite. And he leaves to go talk to Madge, right?
Yeah.
And so Rheneas, on his rounds around the railway that day, he looks for Madge, right? But he can't find her anywhere. Like, he's looking town to town, can't find her along any roadside in any town. And then, at last, Rheneas is going over, like, an old bridge or something, and he's like, oh, this is hopeless. I don't know where she is. We'll never be able to find her. Oh, whoa! And then the bridge crumbles. And then he's, like, on the edge, and the rails are bending downward toward the stream, and he's like, oh, dear! And he calls out for help. He's, help! Someone!
And you hear Madge's horn in the distance.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, I'm coming. Her trailer is like jackknifing left and right.
Yeah, exactly. She's swerving all over the road trying to get there in time, right? And at last she pulls up to him. I'm imagining she takes off the trailer.
I was even saying she like ties a rope to her snub nose, like her little bumper in the front.
Yeah, exactly.
And like yanks him back and like damages her bumper in the process. Like, she's got dents and stuff all up around it. It's been like yanked forward.
And she's like skidding her wheels around, and just for the season, let's say this is right before Christmas, right?
Yeah.
There's snow everywhere. This in the water below. If Rheneas falls in there, it is freezing cold, right? It's no good. They're not going to be able to retrieve him till the spring, right? It's going to be disastrous.
Yeah.
And so he's about to fall into this roaring, raging river, and then Madge is grinding her wheels, sliding her tires back and forth, trying to pull him back, and at last she does, and he's back on firm ground, and then her bumper falls off, and she's just like,
tire pops.
Yeah, exactly. You all right up there, little feller? And Rheneas is just up there like, yes, as all right as I can be. You saved me. And Madge is like, happy to help. And then, I imagine if this was a film, we would fade to the next scene with them all back at the sheds.
Yeah. Right? Or even Madge hooks Rheneas up to her trailer.
Yeah, she could. Maybe his wheels are busted even, and that's the first time she tows an engine home on the trailer flatbed.
Yeah, she's like limping him back on her flat tire. She's like bouncing up and down.
Exactly. And as she goes back to the sheds, right, she's in bad shape, but she doesn't stop. She keeps a constant pace. And Rheneas is impressed. He's like, you're not going to stop. You've got 2 tires blown out and your bumper's off, and then...
Madge would say something like, well... it'd be sure as a shame to stop in the middle of the road.
Yeah, exactly. And Rheneas would just be like...
exactly.
Yeah. He'd realize he totally misjudged her. He would see so much of himself in her. Like,
yeah.
This may be a snub-nosed lorry, but she's basically a Skarloey Railway engine, the way that she thinks. And, ultimately they get back to the sheds. And, and Rheneas apologizes and says how, impressed he was by her bravery. And Skarloey just smiles and kind of, if he could, he'd bump Rheneas with his elbow and just be like, I told you so, and ultimately, the two of them and Madge become great friends. And from that point onward, I think what will happen is, Madge, Skarloey and Rheneas are really in no position to fix the bridge, because, what are they going to do?
So Madge is used to take stuff from one end to the other?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's and I imagine Madge, I don't know who owns Madge, probably some nearby company that's, just kind of operating her as, an independent kind of contractor lorry. But I'm sure that, maybe Sir Handel Brown reaches out to the owner of that company and is or even maybe it's Madge helps the railway in between shifts. So she's not even making, the company any money by doing this. She does all her work for the day for her, for her delivery company. And then in the little, early and late hours of the day when she can get a chance,
she picks up hours.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting because I could see this is honestly a lot like what Rusty does in Rusty Saves the Day, where he's fixing up the line and everything.
I could see Madge sort of almost becoming track maintenance too.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking is I think Madge is basically the proto Rusty. She's before Rusty comes along and there's a dedicated track inspection, track maintenance diesel that, really does all the maintenance work of the railway. Madge is kind of, doing it in her own kind of cobbled together, very unprofessional way where she's kind of
It would be really great if Mr. Ivo Hugh rigged up a set of rail wheels in front, almost like a handlebar.
Yeah, that would be great. Some sort of guiding, and so she can actually ride on the rails when she really needs to. Mm-hmm. That would be great. So she'd get pretty close with Mr. Ivo Hugh then. That's interesting. She would, the two of them would work together a lot to the point where he might even be driving her a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I wonder. That's interesting. It's probably, she's probably trading hands between her own contractor company and Mr. Ivo Hugh quite frequently. There might be a conflict of interest, too, where her company might start getting frustrated that she's spending so much time with the Skarloey.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Madge, in all the work that she's doing on the Skarloey, she's getting busted, she's getting, dinged up and everything. She's coming...
Yeah, that's true.
She's returning to the contractors in such bad shape. And maybe there's other lorries there that are oh my God, Madge, what have you been doing? Are those railway wheels?
Yeah. So now we're seeing Madge's side of the family. What are her brothers and sisters like? And I imagine that none of them are ever getting an ounce of mud on them. None of them are getting dented. None of them are getting scraped.
Yeah.
They all have an image to keep up, right? We wear the company colors, Madge. You simply can't go around and dent yourself up and get all rugged and roughed up, and it's simply not proper, Madge. And Madge is just I'm just doing my best to help people where I see fit. Sometimes that means getting a little dented up and a little scuffed up, sure, but that's kind of part of life.
You know what's great, too, is that, so Scammell made a quote-unquote mechanical horse, which was built in the 30s, that basically looks like the next monkey in the evolution scale.
Yeah.
Or the one down, so right before Madge is built. And those worked on the Great Western, the LNER.
That's pretty prestigious, yeah.
So maybe this contractor is buying up old mechanical horses and buys Madge straight up from the factory.
Yeah, that could be. And so this company that's operating, maybe this company operates all over Sodor, right? It's just that Madge happens to be sent to the Skarloey Railway area of things a lot. But ultimately, this is one of Sodor's biggest lorry companies. It's got a name like Sodor Lorry or something. It's literally
soft side.
Yeah, something like that, right? So all the lorries you see in the background are owned by this company. And Madge is one of their newest ones, and they're expecting to do a lot of great business with her, but she just won't stop getting into what they would call accidents, which really to her are just little spills. It's just, she, maybe I think to Madge, she's so rough and tumble. If she tumbles down the side of a hill, that's not a huge deal to her.
She still has a frame.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But, it's interesting because in Cool Truckings, they say several times, it's what's the phrase they keep?
She wants to be safe and steady.
Yeah, exactly. So it's there's these two sides to Madge I think are very interesting. There's the one that I think is built into her by her family and by her company, which is be safe and steady. Maybe that's even their motto, safe and steady, Sodor lorry, safe and steady, right? But then there's the wild side of Madge. There's the excited, adventurous side.
She gets to unleash it when no one from her company is watching.
Exactly, right? And that it helps that Ivo Hugh is getting her on loan, so he's driving her, and he's just like, he has no problem with her kind of unleashing her wild side. He's just like, just go for it, Madge. And they race down a hill, right? She loves that sort of adventure, but she's kind of caught between the two of them, right?
It would be funny if she's like drifting down the road and then she passes one of her own and immediately goes like straight and narrow.
yeah, exactly, right? It's like she behaves totally differently when her family's around. But then when she's on the Skarloey, this is really the fulfilling, exciting work for her. She's literally saving a railway. She's helping Skarloey and Rheneas to guide this railway through its most difficult period. She feels like she's actually being helpful, not just delivering packages that people don't desperately need. She doesn't want to work for the Sodor equivalent of Amazon. Come on, that's not what she wants to do. Like, she wants to be a rescuer. She wants to be a maintenance vehicle. She wants to help people.
And then the railway starts to heal.
And Sir Handel and Peter Sam show up.
Right, they purchase them.
Yeah. And what's interesting is Madge is dealing with two separate engines, because Madge is the only one who sticks around. Skarloey and Rheneas both go to the works, and now it's Sir Handel and Peter Sam on the railway. And Madge, rather than being kind of the young, bright-eyed, kind of helper on the railway, now...
She's the most senior member of the railway.
Yeah, exactly. Which is weird, because this is only like 3 years later, right? But it's like, because Skarloey and Rheneas just get sent away in such a sudden fashion, she ends up being in that position.
Yeah, so imagine her going head-to-head with Sir Handel. Peter Sam would come along and immediately have respect for Madge. And Sir Handel's like, Madge starts, like, putting on her rail wheels and is, like, going up to Sir Handel, shunting, telling him a train he can pull. And he's like, are they serious? Is this a joke? Is this some kind of prank?
Yeah, exactly.
No. We are not taking orders from a lorry.
Yeah, exactly. And Madge would just kind of dart backward a little bit and be like, oh, well, I'm more than just a lorry. Hardly.
And then for the first time, Madge is the one that has to start spouting safe and steady to Sir Handel.
Yeah, exactly. It's like...
Because Sir Handel gets into all of his scrapes, he sinks into the rails.
Yeah.
And, like, imagine that when he comes back after sinking into the rails, and Madge is like, I'm a lorry, and I've never done that.
Yeah, exactly. And he'd just be so embarrassed, right? What if it's Madge's idea to give Sir Handel the broad tires? Like,
that would be so funny because Sir Handel would hate it.
I know.
Because she'd be like, maybe you just need broad tires. Tires? No.
I imagine it could even be like, everyone's in the shed. Sir Handel's at the back of the shed. Mr. Ivo Hugh and Sir Handel Brown and Peter Sam are all in there, and other Peter Sam are all in there trying to figure out, like, how to fix this problem. And they're all mumbling to each other, like, well, maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe re-gauge him, or maybe the axles, and
yeah, that they look at Madge.
Yeah, and Madge is just smirking. She's just like, and she's looking Sir Handel straight in the eye, and Sir Handel's like, what? What's so funny, lorry? And she's just like, what about just tires? Tires will do the trick. And he's just like, you have to be joking! And everyone looks at him like, that's actually not a bad idea. And Sir Handel's like, goes white in the face. He's like, I beg your pardon. And then we cut to a scene where he's literally having them put on him. And it's like, and the thing you gotta understand about Sir Handel's tires, so in the show, they zoom in on the trailing wheels and make it seem like those are his steamroller wheels. Really, that doesn't do it justice. What they did was, so, steam engines have a thin metal tire around the wheels to protect it so that you have a little small bit to replace instead of replacing the whole wheel after it gets wear. And so on Sir Handel, they just gave him tires that were really ridiculously wide. They stick out way past the the actual physical wheel.
Yeah.
And so that makes up the distance so that he's wide enough to stay on the tracks rather than slipping in between.
It's something that they used to do on American railroads in the 19th century to be able to change the gauge. There's so many different gauges back then.
Yeah, right.
But
because the alternative would be modifying the entire wheel set and moving the physical wheels further apart from each other, maybe modifying the chassis itself, which would just be a nightmare, right? So it's a lot easier and quicker and also lazier and cheaper to move the wheels, to move the tires out. So the point being, it's a really lazy life hack way to, like, you know, to make Sir Handel fit on the track, right? But it works, right?
yeah.
Sir Handel would just rumble into the yard, and he'd run like a charm, but he'd look ridiculous because his tires don't fit his wheels. And then, you know, he'd look to Peter Sam and just be like, "Oh, trust a lorry to put tires on a steam engine. I don't understand. How is she the senior member of this railway? How is it that a lorry is telling me how I should be running?" And, you know, he's just furious, and he looks away, and he's, you know, if he could, he'd fold his arms and go, "Whew." And Peter Sam would just be like, "Well, at least you're working properly, Sir Handel. I mean, if you weren't, then imagine you'd be at the back of the shed all the time." And Sir Handel's just like, "Well, it'd be better than this, that's for sure."
Yeah, and then I'd imagine Sir Handel is immediately, like, distrustful and resentful of all road vehicles he encounters. And this puts him right in the position.
Yeah. Especially maintenance vehicles, too. Which is why, like, you know...
And then George comes along in his life and is, like, talking about all of Sir Handel's faults. I'm sure Madge is, like, really put off by George, but she has to work with him sometimes.
Imagine Madge when she hears that George and Sir Handel are having altercations. I imagine she might go and talk to George on her own time, like, outside of the whole Sir Handel-George conflict. She might go talk to him and be like, you know, "Howdy, you the steamroller that's been bugging my friend?" And you know, he's just like, you know, "What's it to you, snub-nose?" and she's just like, you know, "Well, I don't appreciate all the insults you're hurtling his way. I know Sir Handel can be a little bit snooty, but, you know, it's not worth getting into altercations with him. Trust me, I've tried, it never ends well." And, you know, George is just like, "As if I'm going to take advice from some dumb lorry."
Get out of my way, tripod.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, he just rumbles past and bumps her on his way out, and she's just like, "Huh, well, no manners in that one, that's for sure." You know, and then George is sent away, and that fence is built up, you know, between the rails and the road. You know, maybe Madge is the one who builds the fence.
That would be so funny, because then you'd see her building it, and, like, Sir Handel would be going by, and she'd be like, "It's for your own good."
Yeah, exactly. It's the equivalent of her being between George and Sir Handel and saying, "Break it up! Break it up! Break it up!" And, and literally just, like, separating them. It's like, no more. You are not running into each other on my watch. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Speaking of Madge doing all this maintenance along the line, I think it's high time we talked about her relationship with Rusty, because I think that, you know, inevitably the two of them would have to get to know each other very well, considering Rusty essentially comes along to do the job that Madge has kind of been, like, unofficially doing. It's interesting, because Madge...
It would be sad, because I think Madge would start to... Then, suddenly, her work-life balance would become more about the company again.
Yeah, that's true, because Rusty would be... You know, it's interesting. I think Rusty maybe lacks a little bit of, like, emotional sensitivity. Like, he doesn't fully... He can't read people that well.
Yeah.
And so I think when Rusty comes along, he would see that Madge is doing all this work, and he'd be like, "Oh, thank you for doing all this work, Madge. It's greatly appreciated. But I've got it now, so you can go back and work at your company." And, you know, and she'd be like, "Oh, you sure you don't need any help?" And he's like, "No, I think I'm good, thank you." And she's like, not even a little smidge of help. I mean, maybe
He'd just be, like, tittering off. He'd be like, "Goodbye."
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, what an odd lorry, you know. And he wouldn't realize that really what she's saying is, "I want to help. Please don't push me out," right? And he wouldn't fully get that. Because that's just not how Rusty thinks. He's thinking quite practically and logically. He's like, "Okay, there's a job that needs to get done. If I can do it on my own, I can relieve her of that burden." And, you know, that's that, right? And so he starts doing all the maintenance work on the railway. And so Madge goes back to her company, and it would actually be really sad to see how spotless she is. Like, they'd buff out all the dents, they'd polish her, they'd clean her, they'd make her look just splendid. and she wouldn't have any damage or anything. It's just a sad mark of the fact that she doesn't do anything exciting anymore, because Rusty's doing all her work.
So then I think this is a good lead into Cool Truckings, because I think now...
This is a really good lead in, actually, because Rusty comes along and takes away her work, and so who's to come along and make her life exciting again but Duncan, the anti-Rusty?
Yeah, so I think that it's wintertime. It's like 2 weeks until Christmas. It's been like blizzarding for like a week straight. And the lines are closed. Maybe even Duncan is the only one on the other side of that viaduct.
Right.
And the viaduct collapses.
Oh,
so...
God.
So Duncan's like, he'd be shouting out a million swear words, but then the thing controller would go up to Madge and be like, Madge, how are you? It's been far too long. It's been like, what, a year and a half? God. And, Madge would be like, say no more. What you need?
She'd be so excited. She'd be just arriving in a village with like some packages, right? And she'd immediately, when the thing controller comes over, she'd dump those packages. Like, nothing would break, but she'd just be like, say no more. And they all perfectly land on the ground. Like, she darts forward and then they all fly off the flatbed and all land in like a stack. And she's just like, I'm at your service. And he's like, well, there's been a small bridge collapse. Oh, geez. Yes. Not particularly sure if it's Duncan's fault or not, but either way, he's stuck on the other end.
We've got to get him to the sheds to get checked out. He needs, a full inspection, and, we just like to have him home for Christmas,
Yeah, exactly.
So Madge goes over, and here's the thing, is that she's been buffed out and spotless. What if even her other lorries at home and the contractors are saying, Madge, we've only had you for like 10 years, and by God, you need a lot more maintenance than the others. We can't handle this. One more slip-up, Madge, and I'm sorry, we'll have to just say goodbye.
Yeah, she's getting to the point where there's a lot more wear on her engine, and this company, they don't just repair their vehicles no matter the cost. They're gonna send Madge to the junkyard if she gets too much wear on her.
So she's really got to play it safe and steady.
Yeah, exactly. She's on the straight and narrow, right? If you get messed up again, hanging out with the Skarloey Railway engines, then that's it, you're out. She promises herself. She's like, all right, well, I can save Duncan, and I can do this job safe and steady. I can be calm and collected, and I won't get any dents. Yeah, I can do that. Of course I can do that. But she doesn't know what she's in for with Duncan. He's kind of like the embodiment of her wild side. Like, he has they could really bond over this. Like, it's interesting. Madge is kind of a lot like Rusty in the kind of service side and the kind of dedication and responsibility side. But then she's a lot like Duncan in the kind of excitable, kind of adventurous side. Like, they embody her two sides, right? They're like the devil and angel on her shoulders. And Duncan is the devil, right? And he's literally on her shoulder right now.
Yeah.
What do you think their first interaction would look like? Like, when they first meet each other?
I think that, contrary to a lot of people when they first meet Duncan, Madge is kind of excited. Because she
can kind of see that, like, wild spirit in his eyes, and she's like, I have not seen that spirit in like a year and a half. Everybody that I hang out with back at the lorry depot is, well, they're dull as bricks, frankly.
Yeah.
And Duncan's like, oh, well, there's nothing dull about me, let me tell you.
And then the entire time that they're on the roads, Duncan, Madge is still in this mindset. Okay, can't go to the junkyard. I've got to ring it in a little bit. But Duncan is like, come on, why don't you drift a little bit?
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, well, I haven't jackknifed in months, but I could try.
Yeah, exactly. She's almost like a recovering addict being like kind of pushed to like kind of go past that boundary, except there's nothing really wrong with what she does. I mean, Duncan pushes her a little bit too far, but ultimately, really the problem is her lorry depot and the fact that they have a problem with her wild side. But there's nothing really wrong with her adventurous nature. And in fact, it's really what's helped the Skarloey Railway through thick and thin. But Duncan kind of is the most extreme version of that side of her. So, he's really like, come on, do a drift for me, come on. And it's like, and she's like, all right, here we go, and they just slide through the snow, and they're both laughing all the way, and just like, and Madge finally, like the kind of the the life comes back into her eyes for the first time in like years.
Right.
Where it's like she's been wanting this so badly, to have some adventure, right? She's been trying to be safe and steady, and it's just miserable. Like, she doesn't want to. She wants to live, right? And Duncan knows how to live better than any engine on the Skarloey Railway.
And then she victimizes a policeman.
God, yeah. She literally, maybe it's even Duncan's idea. He's like, you know, why don't you blow some snow in his face, eh? You know, just to stick it to Johnny Law. Oh, I don't know about that. It's like, come on, what's the worst that can happen? And so she drifts through, and the policeman gets sprayed with snow, and he's like, hey, not cool.
Yeah. Well, and then they slide over the edge, over the cliff.
Yeah.
And Madge actually does some serious damage to her undercarriage.
Yeah. And maybe she's more nervous about that than falling off the edge.
That's the thing. I think she is, because then she pulls back off the cliff, and she's like, are you alright, Duncan? And then Duncan's like, oh, I'm fine, how about you? And she tries to reverse, and she's making a grinding noise. She's like, oh my god.
Yeah. Maybe even when she's on the edge. I know in the episode when she's teetering on the edge, she says to herself, she's like, what am I gonna do? And it's like,
it's not about the edge, it's about the...
Yeah, exactly, because she backs off just fine. It's because she can feel that there's something messed up on her undercarriage, and they're not gonna fix that. And she's like, God, it's over for me. You know, like, what have I done, right? And maybe even on the way back, right, she actually, like, she doesn't say anything. She's white as a ghost. And Duncan's like, hey, what's wrong, Madge? Come on, where is the Madge that I talked to 10 minutes ago? The one who was slipping around, and it's like, you know, he's a little concerned about her. He's like, come on, you're starting to freak me out. You alright?
Like, yeah, like they get to that bumpy road, and then they can take the straight and narrow, and she just like goes straight down a straight and narrow path.
Yeah, and she's just like, she's like, my manager told me, Duncan, before I started this journey, that if I got damaged again, he wasn't gonna fix me.
And then Duncan would say something like, well, why don't you just run away?
And she's like, what? I can't just run away. Come on. If I could have run away, I would have done that 20 years ago.
Then Duncan's like, oh, please. I was recently sold from an industrial factory in Scotland. Do you think that happens easily?
Yeah. They hold on to their engines for 30, 40 years over there. And trust me, I only spent 5. and you really think I could just run away? I can't do that. They track me down. They'd what? How about this? You go and hide in the back of the carriage sheds, and I'll get in front of you, and I'll make sure that they don't get in there. And she's like, you'd really do that for me? Yeah, of course. I've had the most fun day I've had in maybe my whole life. I think that's worth defending you.
Yeah. Then they get back to the sheds, and they all the Skarloey engines are like, oh my god, it's Madge. And they, at first they're just surprised to see her, and then Duncan's like, all right, time to cut the welcome party short, but Skarloey, Freddy, make some room.
yeah, exactly. They back her in. Like, they put her in the back of the engine sheds, and everyone gets out in front. At first, Madge is worried they might not all defend her, but then Duncan explains the situation, like, the absolute pillock who's in charge of her company says that he's gonna scrap her if she comes back with even a dent. Now, I'm not gonna allow that, and you shouldn't either. We gotta protect her. And Skarloey and Rheneas and all the other engines mumble to each other, and Skarloey's just like, very well. Get in the back, Madge.
Yeah.
They're all like a unit, right? It's kind of like how they protect Luke, right? Like, if there's someone in trouble, the entire railway is unanimously like, no, get in the back. We're not letting that happen.
You know what'd be great is then one of the mechanical horses comes by,
yeah,
prim and proper with like the manager, and they'd be like, we expected Madge back several hours ago.
Yeah.
Where in the hell is my lorry?
Duncan's just boldly like, she's not coming back. That's the truth of it. And he's like, I beg your pardon. I said she's not coming back. Not coming back to your shoddy company.
They'd all wheeze steam at him and like blow their whistles.
Yeah.
The manager gets like knocked off his feet into the snow. He gets up. He's like, fine. If that's how you are, I'll take you all to court. I'll bankrupt this entire railway. You'll see. I can bury you in legal fees.
Oh, God.
And so then he gets in his mechanical horse and drives off.
Yeah,
so then there's this period of uncertainty where they're like, oh God, have we brought the fuzz down on us?
Yeah, exactly. Madge is
and-
like, it's probably not a good thing that I blew snow with that police officer earlier today. That probably won't help us.
Well, and then so like I said, this is snowy. It's like maybe it's like a week before Christmas.
Right.
So then, Christmas Day comes and they're having this party. And all the engines are gathered around and whatnot. They're all happy, but they're also very concerned for Madge. So there's this kind of uneasy tension. And then Mr. Ivo Hugh comes along. Mr. Ivo Hugh says something along the lines of, well, Christmas this year is going to be a little unusual. I know that we have a fugitive.
God damn it.
But I'm sure that we will work this out. Good night, all, and Merry Christmas. And so this is like Christmas Eve. They all go to sleep and whatnot, and Madge is kind of like,
right.
I can't stay here.
I don't want to put you all through this. I mean, you've all done so much for me already. I don't want to. I've been fighting to keep this railway open for years. I can't get it shut down just because of my own law breaking. And, Skarloey and Rheneas are just like, Madge, we are going to defend you till the end, just as you've defended us. Plain and simple. Even if that means that we get into a little bit of trouble, well, it'll be worth it for you. And all the engines agree, and Madge is just like, she feels terrible, but, they really are coming through for her, right? Yeah. And then I imagine, like, in the morning, right, maybe on Christmas morning, Sir Handel Brown walks in, and he's got, like, some of the legal papers, and he's got some lawyers with him, and he's just like, Madge is ours. And everyone cheers, right? and it's like, and Duncan's like, sir, how did you swing that? And he's like, oh, well, it was a long night, let me tell you.
The Fat Controller is a master negotiator.
Yeah. God damn it. He brings the Fat Controller into it, and the all of them, I imagine they were all up all night on Christmas Eve, while Ivo Hugh was calming everybody down at the party. Sir Handel Brown is over at the lorry company, setting everything straight, right? And, was able to properly purchase Madge.
You know what would be awesome is if this is the Railway series, I'm sure they'd paint her red with blue trim.
That's true. They probably would, which would be cool. Or I think maybe more likely black, like Rusty.
Yeah, probably black.
Because then she would have kind of that whole motif. And so I think the one thing that isn't tied up so then how does she settle into the railway with Rusty? Maybe that night, right? Christmas night, while Madge is sleeping outside, finally safe. Rusty and Duncan are in the back sidings together, and Rusty's about trying to get some sleep, and Duncan's like, hey, Rusty, psst. And Rusty's like, what? What do you want, Duncan? And he's just like, look at Madge over there. I mean, I think she'd much prefer to be sleeping over here with us in the maintenance sidings. And Rusty's like, what? Why would she want that? She's not maintenance, Duncan. Go back to bed. And he's like, Rusty, you still don't get it, do you? She's the maintenance lorry. That's been a thing since the very beginning of the railway. Or at least the beginning of when I've been here. And, and Rusty's just like, what? No, I replaced her. She was fine with...
Fine. Would you like to get a set of road tires, Rusty?
Yeah. Rusty opens one eye and he's like, it would be good to have somebody who can actually go by road. We don't really have anyone like that. Oh, but she wouldn't be interested. I mean, when I first arrived, Madge said that she was fine with, giving up her maintenance work. Of course she would see that, Rusty. You gotta read into what she actually means. She's terribly sad that she can't do the maintenance anymore. I mean, why do you think she so desperately drifted through the snow with me? She wanted some adventure. Adventure that I could provide. Yes, well, you do provide something. And you could provide her with it by fixing broken bridges and by dragging engines out of the mud. Dragging you out of the mud. Dragging engines out of the mud. And, rescuing stranded coaches and that sort of thing. She would love that kind of work. Just give her the chance. And Rusty's like, well, I definitely need the help. I just didn't realize she was so interested in it. And I think the next day, the first big job Madge and Rusty would undertake is repairing the viaduct. But it's interesting because Rusty isn't even technically a diesel. He's like described as a rail tractor, which, I think
I don't know if he takes diesel fuel or not.
I don't know if he... Yeah, I'm not sure if he does. But
maybe powered by gasoline.
like, he's a lot smaller than all the others, not in the show, but if you look at, like, his basis, then he is just tiny. Like, he's more of a tool, more of a machine than he is an actual locomotive.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Madge is, right? So I think the two of them could relate on that, where they're both kind of maintenance vehicles, not so much engines, per se. God, that makes me wonder, like, imagine a scenario where Rusty could be converted to road. If he needed that sort of, like, I could actually see it
Why
happening.
don't you try it, Rusty? Well, I don't know. I guess I could.
Yeah. But I think, Madge and Rusty would get to be good friends. And it'd be interesting, because Madge would kind of be, like, a lot more excitable and a lot more kind of, she would have the more crazy ideas. But she'd also have a practical side that Rusty would relate to. But it would be interesting because it'd be like, Rusty would have one way of repairing the viaduct where he'd be like, well, I suppose we should just wait for all the bricks to get here, one by one. It won't be long. And Madge is just like, well, why don't I just cut through the valley and go all the way there? And in fact, there's no engines up there to shunt those trucks. Maybe I take you on the flatbed. And he's like, oh dear, a flatbed through the weaving caverns of the valleys? I don't know, Madge. And Madge is like, oh, come on, it's not a big deal. And Rusty's like, well, okay. And then we cut to, like, them veering through the valley, and he's like, oh, no, wait, no, stop, no, oh, don't be such a baby, Rusty. We'll be there soon.
There aren't any ropes on this trailer.
Like, I could really see the two of them having a good dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like all of that. I never would have imagined we would have put Madge so early, but I'm really glad we did, because, like, that just seems like...
She seems so connected to the railway that it only makes sense that she grew with it.
Yeah, and the fact that everybody kind of... Like, the way that Duncan talks about her in Cool Truckings, like, he acts like she's always been here. And it kind of... It seems to me like, we've got a lot of background road vehicles. There's got to be hundreds that deal with the Skarloey Railway engines. Or at least dozens. Maybe Madge is just one of those. What's really stopping a snub-nosed lorry from having been there ever since the 40s?
Yeah.
And I think that is really her story. And so, she is very intertwined with the railway, and she entered it in its darkest hour. And so it makes a lot of sense that she would feel a great responsibility to care for these engines, to look out for them, and to help in any way she could, because they were so desperate when she first met them. And now everything's settled, and she's a proper, permanent, owned member of the railway, which is wonderful. And, she is a permanent resident. I imagine she maybe even has her own little maintenance shed off the side of the Crovan's Gate sheds,
That would be sweet.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. That'd be great. Okay. I think we've said our piece on Madge. I think that's, I think we've explored all the avenues, all the snowy roadways that I would have wanted to explore.
Yeah, she's just such a great character. I really do. When I think of Madge, I think of Cool Truckings. I think of her bouncing around in the snow and having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really wanted to hash her out, because it's like, is she part of the Skarloey Railway? Is she owned by someone else? What does...
And it turns out our answer was both.
Yeah,
in different points in her timeline.
She was a Christmas gift to the Skarloey Railway.
Very true, very true. All right, well then, without further ado, I've been Master of the Lemons, a.k.a. Lemmy.
And I'm here the Japanese Train, a.k.a. Matt.
Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys.